Picture this. You're in a meeting, and that one colleague confidently explains quantum physics after watching a single YouTube video. Or your neighbor who becomes an instant medical expert after Googling symptoms for 5 minutes. Maybe it's the person on social media who solves complex economic problems with a single tweet. Here's what's truly fascinating. These aren't malicious people trying to deceive others. They genuinely believe they understand these complex topics. They feel knowledgeable, informed, even expert-level confident. But here's the kicker. The less they actually know, the more confident they become. This isn't just annoying. It's a fundamental flaw in how human brains process knowledge and self-assessment. Today, we're exploring one of psychology's most important discoveries: why incompetent people are often the most confident, why a little knowledge is genuinely dangerous, and how this cognitive blind spot affects every single one of us in ways we never realized. Welcome to the world of illusory superiority. In 1995, something extraordinary happened that would change our understanding of human psychology forever. A man named MacArthur Wheeler decided to rob 2 banks in Pittsburgh. But here's what made this case legendary. He did it in broad daylight, with no mask, no disguise, nothing to conceal his identity. When police arrested him later that evening, Wheeler was genuinely bewildered. "But I wore the lemon juice," he protested. Wheeler had rubbed lemon juice all over his face because he believed it would make him invisible to security cameras. His logic? Since lemon juice can be used as invisible ink, it must work on human skin too. This bizarre case caught the attention of psychologist David Dunning, who realized Wheeler represented something profound about human nature. Sometimes people are so incompetent that they cannot recognize their own incompetence. Intrigued by Wheeler's case, Dunning partnered with graduate student Dunning-Kruger to investigate this phenomenon scientifically. They designed a series of experiments testing people's abilities in humor, grammar, and logic, then asked participants to predict how well they had performed compared to others. The results were startling and completely consistent. People who scored in the bottom 25% consistently overestimated their performance, believing they had outperformed nearly 2/3 of other participants. In reality, they had only beaten about 12% of test takers. Meanwhile, people who actually performed well tended to underestimate their abilities. But here's what makes this discovery revolutionary. It wasn't just that incompetent people were overconfident. The research revealed a double curse. Not only did these individuals lack the skills to perform well, but they also lacked the metacognitive ability to recognize good performance when they saw it, including their own poor performance. As Dunning explained, if you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. The skills you need to produce a right answer are exactly the skills you need to recognize what a right answer is. This creates a perfect storm of ignorance. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know it. To understand why this happens, imagine knowledge as an iceberg. What you can see above water represents what you actually know. What lies beneath, invisible but massive, represents everything you don't know you don't know. Beginners see only the tip and assume that's the whole iceberg. This creates what researchers call the beginner's bubble, a dangerous state where minimal exposure to a topic creates maximum confidence. You learn that vaccines contain ingredients with complicated names, and suddenly you feel qualified to debate immunology with doctors. You read one article about climate data, and you're ready to challenge decades of climate science. The mechanism is surprisingly simple. When you first encounter a complex topic, everything seems straightforward because you only see the surface layer. You haven't yet discovered the hidden complexities, the nuanced exceptions, the interconnected systems that experts spend decades learning to navigate. It's like looking at a chessboard for the first time. The rules seem simple. Pieces move in predictable patterns. The objective is clear. A beginner might feel confident they could beat anyone with just a little practice. Only after playing do you begin to appreciate the millions of possible combinations, the deep strategic thinking, the pattern recognition that separates novices from masters. The internet has transformed this psychological quirk into a global epidemic. Never before in human history has it been so easy to acquire surface-level information about virtually any topic. A few minutes on Google can make anyone feel like an expert on neuroscience, economics, or international politics. This isn't just an academic curiosity. It has profound real-world implications that affect every aspect of society. In healthcare, patients who spend an hour researching symptoms online often arrive at doctors' offices convinced they know their diagnosis better than physicians who studied for decades. This can lead to delayed treatment, unnecessary anxiety, and deteriorated doctor-patient relationships. In the workplace, the effect manifests as what researchers call confident incompetence syndrome. Employees with limited experience often volunteer for projects beyond their capabilities, not out of malice or ambition, but because they genuinely believe they can handle complex tasks they don't fully understand. In politics, voters with minimal understanding of economic policy often express the strongest opinions about complex fiscal decisions. They support or oppose policies based on simplified explanations that ignore the multifaceted nature of economic systems. Perhaps most dangerously, in crisis situations, people with partial information often become the most vocal advocates for action, drowning out more knowledgeable but cautious voices. Emergency responders regularly encounter well-meaning civilians who are confident they know the best course of action, despite lacking training in crisis management. The digital age has made these consequences more severe because confident voices can now reach massive audiences instantly. A person with superficial knowledge can create content that influences thousands of others, spreading misinformation wrapped in the compelling package of absolute certainty. Here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Actual experts often struggle with the opposite problem. The more you genuinely know about a topic, the more you become aware of its complexities and your own limitations. This creates what researchers call the expert's curse, a tendency to underestimate your own abilities relative to others. True experts are acutely aware of edge cases, exceptions to rules, and the boundaries of current knowledge. A real climate scientist knows exactly which aspects of climate modeling remain uncertain. A genuine medical expert understands the limitations of current treatments and the gaps in medical knowledge. This expert humility often puts them at a disadvantage in public discourse. When a confident non-expert claims the science is settled on a complex topic, and a real expert responds with nuanced explanations of uncertainty and limitations, guess who sounds more convincing to the average person? The expert's detailed qualifications and acknowledgement of complexity can actually sound less credible than the beginner's simple, confident assertions. This creates a perverse incentive structure where overconfidence is rewarded and intellectual honesty is punished. In academic settings, this manifests as what researchers call imposter syndrome, highly qualified individuals doubting their own competence. Meanwhile, those with minimal qualifications often experience the opposite, imposter's confidence, where limited knowledge creates inflated self-assessment.
The intensity of this effect varies dramatically across different cultures and social contexts. Western, particularly American culture, tends to reward confidence and self-promotion, creating fertile ground for overestimation of abilities. From early childhood, people are encouraged to believe in themselves and fake it till you make it. This cultural emphasis on confidence over competence has created what some researchers call the American confidence premium, a social system that often rewards displays of certainty regardless of underlying ability. Job interviews favor confident candidates over competent but modest ones. Leadership positions often go to those who project authority rather than those who demonstrate wisdom. In contrast, Many East Asian cultures emphasize humility, continuous learning, and awareness of personal limitations. Research shows that people from these cultures often underestimate their abilities. They're more likely to say they performed average, even when they excelled. This cultural tendency toward self-criticism may actually protect against overconfidence effects. Social media has globalized the confidence-rewarding model, creating platforms where bold statements generate more engagement than nuanced thoughts. The algorithm doesn't distinguish between confident expertise and confident ignorance. It simply promotes whatever generates clicks and shares. This has created echo chambers where people with similar levels of partial knowledge reinforce each other's overconfidence, creating communities of shared ignorance that feel like communities of shared expertise. Recognizing this bias in ourselves is uniquely challenging because, by definition, it blinds us to our own limitations. However, research has identified several practical strategies for developing more accurate self-assessment. The most effective approach is actively seeking out disconfirming evidence, information that challenges your existing beliefs and assumptions. This requires fighting against your natural confirmation bias, the tendency to seek information that supports what you already think you know. Deliberately exposing yourself to expert-level content in areas where you feel confident can be humbling and educational. If you think you understand economics, try reading academic economic journals. If you feel knowledgeable about psychology, attend a graduate-level psychology course. The complexity you encounter will quickly calibrate your confidence to a more realistic level. Another powerful technique is what researchers call pre-mortem analysis. Before making decisions based on your knowledge, systematically consider what could go wrong and what you might be missing. This forces you to confront the limitations of your understanding before they become costly mistakes. Regular feedback from genuine experts is crucial, but this requires overcoming the natural defensiveness that emerges when our competence is questioned. The key is learning to distinguish between attacks on your ego and information about your actual performance. Most importantly, cultivating what researchers call intellectual humility, the recognition that your current knowledge is always incomplete and potentially flawed. Perhaps the most counterintuitive finding in this research is that comfort with uncertainty is actually a marker of intellectual sophistication. People who can say, "I don't know," or "I'm not sure," when appropriate, often understand topics more deeply than those who express absolute certainty. This creates a fascinating paradox. The more you learn, the more comfortable you become with not knowing.
Real expertise involves understanding the boundaries of knowledge and being honest with those limitations. A true expert in any field can quickly identify the questions that remain unanswered and the areas where current understanding is incomplete. In contrast, people caught in the overconfidence trap typically express certainty about everything within their perceived domain of expertise. They have strong opinions about topics they've barely studied, and clear answers to questions that have puzzled experts for decades. This suggests that intellectual maturity involves developing what philosophers call epistemic humility, awareness of the limitations of human knowledge, combined with openness to learning and changing your mind when presented with better evidence. In our current information environment, this kind of intellectual humility is both more difficult and more necessary than ever before. The ability to distinguish between confidence and competence, both in yourself and others, has become an essential life skill. The goal isn't to eliminate confidence entirely, but to calibrate it accurately to actual ability and understanding. Understanding this psychological phenomenon has practical implications for every area of life. In professional settings, learning to recognize overconfidence in yourself and others can improve decision-making and team dynamics. When someone expresses absolute certainty about complex issues, it's worth asking what evidence supports their confidence and whether they've considered alternative perspectives. In educational contexts, this knowledge can transform how we approach learning. Instead of feeling frustrated when advanced material reveals the limitations of your understanding, you can recognize this discomfort as a sign of intellectual growth. The confusion you feel when encountering expert-level content isn't an indication of your inadequacy. It's evidence that you're beginning to grasp the true complexity of the subject. For consumers of information, understanding this bias provides a valuable filter for evaluating sources. Be skeptical of voices that express absolute certainty about complex topics, especially when they lack relevant expertise. Pay attention to sources that acknowledge uncertainty, discuss limitations, and present nuanced views. These are often more reliable indicators of genuine knowledge. In personal relationships, this awareness can improve communication and reduce conflict. When disagreements arise, consider whether either party might be operating from a position of overconfidence. Sometimes the most productive response to confident assertions isn't counterarguments, but questions that help reveal the depth of actual understanding behind the confidence. The journey from ignorant confidence to informed humility is one of the most important intellectual developments any person can undergo. It's not about becoming less confident. It's about earning your confidence through genuine competence while maintaining awareness of your limitations. In our age of information abundance and opinion amplification, the ability to accurately assess your own knowledge has never been more crucial. We're surrounded by confident voices offering simple solutions to complex problems, and distinguishing between genuine expertise and illusory knowledge requires understanding how the human mind processes information and self-assessment. The most successful people aren't those who never experience overconfidence. We all fall into this trap occasionally. They're the ones who develop systems and habits that help them recognize when their confidence might be outpacing their competence. Remember that every expert was once a beginner who climbed down from Mount Confidence, struggled through the valley of doubt, and earned their way up the slope of competence. The difference between those who achieve genuine expertise and those who remain trapped in overconfidence isn't intelligence or talent. It's the willingness to confront the uncomfortable reality of how much they don't know. As the ancient philosopher Socrates understood centuries ago, wisdom begins with recognizing the extent of your own ignorance. In a world full of confident voices, perhaps the wisest thing you can do is question your own certainty, especially when you feel most sure of yourself.